Okay, we are at 5 o'clock. Let's call our meeting to order. I'll roll for those to determine who's here. Bob Beaudry.
Here.
Thank you. Brian Ferguson. Brian, are you on board? Brian Ferguson. Okay, we'll check back in a few minutes.
Sorry, I had it on mute accidentally.
Okay, so this, Brian, you're on board?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jill Doyle?
Yes.
Doug Holtz?
Yes.
And Joe Plankus. So we have a full quorum for the March 24th meeting of the Redevelopment Commission. Just to make a couple comments here at the beginning, we have a number of participants that are available for our meeting. Paul Reese from Craig DeVault is here. Manny Herzog from Taft Hollister. Ken Coker, are you here from BP Tournaments? Ken Coker, are you available?
Here.
Are you here? Okay, evidently.
This is Blake. I'm here. This is Blake Hibler. I'm with BPT. I'm here on behalf.
Okay. So Blake will be speaking for Ken. William Knox is here and Todd Bertrand. And in addition, what I'd like to do is flip two items on the agenda, flip the field maintenance and the amendment agreement, take the amendment agreement second right after the Champion Park agreement discussion, and then the field maintenance would be the third item rather than the second. Let me just make a couple of comments too going forward. We know there's been a lot of hype surrounding various meetings in Westfield recently and the like. So the only request I have today is let's keep the discussion civil. Let's deal with the facts as they are presented and maintain the level of professionalism I know we all want to see in our elected and appointed bodies. So we'll move forward with that. And the next item on the agenda are the meeting minutes. Are there any additions, corrections, modifications from any of the commission members on the minutes?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, this is Todd. I believe Mr. Cox is on the call as well, and I don't know if you called him in the role.
Oh, Jimmy Cox. I'm sorry, Jimmy.
Yep,
I apologize. Are you on the line, Jim?
I'm here. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you very much. I apologize for that. Thank you, Todd. At any rate, back to the minutes. Are there any changes, modifications to the minutes?
Yeah, this is Brian Ferguson. I have,
Yeah.
as you know, in our email exchanges, I've outlined several issues I have with the minutes.
Okay.
Particularly with respect to the fact that these three proposed agreements were introduced at the March 15th RDC meeting. They were not referenced in the agenda. The approximately 11 minutes were spent discussing those. It was moved for a vote to vote on the approval of those agreements. They were presented orally, and
Yeah, and then we basically said we'll carry over to the next meeting.
right, we're going to table it, right.
But we can make that adjustment, Brian. That's not a problem. That's a good point. So I guess really ask the commission, do you want to see a final version at the next month's meeting, or do we just approve it with the modifications that Brian's indicated needs to be added to the current minutes?
I'd like to see the revised minutes.
Okay, let's carry it over to the April meeting, and then we'll make the modifications. Everybody can see it and comment on, make sure we've got everything captured that needs to be captured. That's fine.
I have one additional comment about the March 15th meeting. There was at the very end of the meeting, there was a handout from, that was presented from Cronin, that was Cronin Associates.
Okay, yes.
Dated February 26th, and I think it's a 5-page report. And if that was handed out to the committee, it's my belief that should have been posted on the website.
Well, you're saying after it's been given to the committee members, it should also be added to the website. as
Yeah.
a link.
Right. And then, it would have been nice, since it was dated February 26th, it would have been nice that it had been posted prior to that meeting as well.
Right. Well, it's, basically a report to us. So, that certainly should be added. It is a public document. It's been disseminated, so we can make arrangements to get that link back through that meeting for the information that was posted.
And then, I'm sorry, one more thing, Joe.
Yeah.
You talked about moving the agenda items. Which one are we talking about first? Which agreement?
Okay, the first one on the next item after minutes is the Champion Park agreement. That stays there. I just want to flip the sequence of the other two because from a time sequence standpoint, one occurs before the other. The amendment agreement goes back further in time than the field maintenance agreement that we've been writing each other about.
Yeah.
So flipping those two, the change.
I actually think it makes more sense to discuss the approval of the amendment agreement first.
But we want to cover the Champion Park agreement first because that is totally divorced from the other two items, has nothing to do with the other two. So we want to get that one out of the way, and then we'll deal with the other ones in the sequence that I've changed.
Well, actually, I don't agree with that statement, but
That's the way the agenda's set up, Brian. So we're going to move next on the Champion Park.
you're gonna ram that through, huh?
No, I'm in charge of the meeting, and I have the right to change as president to change the agenda or modify it.
And all I'm suggesting is that I think we should discuss the original agreement that we have and the operation of that agreement before we decide to enter into any new agreements or modify any agreements.
The reason this meeting was called was because of the time nature of this particular Champion Park agreement. So we're going to deal with that one first, and we'll have our discussions when William presents it, and we'll see where that takes us, and we'll deal with any of the questions that come up. We got no timeline tonight. We've got plenty of time to talk about them all. We're not bumping up against another meeting or anything like that. So we'll.
Mr. Plankis, this is Manny. Sorry to interrupt. Mr. Plankis, this is Manny. Sorry to interrupt. As a president, you have the option to rearrange the schedule, so to speak. But if there's disagreement, you might as well take a voice vote on moving that item up, just to clear the record.
Okay, fine. We'll take a vote. Commission, do I have a motion to flip the two items mentioned? Take the amendment agreement right after Champion Park, and then the field maintenance agreement is the third item that we'll discuss. Third set of documents we'll discuss.
Yeah, this is Bob Beaudry. I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion to.
This is Doug. I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion by Bob Beaudry, second by Doug, to flip the two items. I'll take a roll call vote. All in favor of flipping those two items? Joe Plankus, yes. Bob Beaudry?
Are we voting to flip them?
We're voting to flip the two items on the agenda. We have a motion and a second on the floor in regards to modifying the agenda.
Okay. I guess yes.
Okay. Doug Holtz,
Yes.
Jill Doyle,
Yes.
Brian Ferguson,
Yes.
Joe Plankus, yes. Okay, we made the adjustments to the agenda, so.
Hey, Joe. I'm sorry, Joe. Before we get started, I wanted to ask a question before we started all this. At the last meeting, someone asked a question about whether we as the RDC have been bonded. Was that ever answered? Are we currently bonded?
I think that question was answered by one of the attorneys, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought he said we could be he could make that happen if we wanted to be, but that's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to figure out, are we bonded before we make some of these decisions?
Yes. Yeah, this is Cam Stearns. I will confirm that the statute requires that you be bonded in an aggregate amount of $15,000.
Okay.
As the commission, and I've confirmed with John Rogers that you are in fact bonded.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good question, Bob. Thanks for the follow-up.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to William to talk about the Champion Park agreement.
I'm sorry. I'm not familiar with the procedures. Can I make a motion?
In regards to what?
Well, I'd like to move the approval of the amendment agreement up before the consent of the Championship Park agreement.
No, because we just voted on the agreement, or we just voted on flipping those two items so that
Right.
the agreement is third.
Yeah, that was a separate motion. And
Okay, so you want to make a motion to do what, Brian?
move the approval of the amendment agreement to be before the consent of Championship Park agreement.
Okay, you're free to make a motion.
That's my motion.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion?
This Bob, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Brian, a second by Bob Beaudry to move the amendment agreement ahead of the Champion Park agreement. I'll take a roll call vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Brian Ferguson,
Aye.
Bob Beaudry,
Aye.
Jill Doyle,
Nay.
Doug Holtz,
Nay.
Joe Plankus, nay. Motion fails. Let's move on to the Champion Park agreement. William, it's all yours.
Yes, good evening, commissioners, and thanks for the time tonight. This one is the consent agreement. I think many of you are aware in the 2014 agreement with bullpen tournaments, there is a non-compete that is in place. This consent agreement would allow bullpen to operate only the complex identified in the agreement, which is Championship Park in Kokomo. We see tremendous value in providing this consent, and that's the reason we're bringing it to you tonight. Again, this only applies to that particular location, and if they were to look at trying to conduct business at any other facility to this nature in the state of Indiana, they would have to come for us yet again for another approval. So I know there may be questions, so I'll pause there and answer any questions that there may be in regards to the agreement.
Okay, questions from commission members?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, Joe.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so in regards to this consent agreement, we're to receive hotel rebate monies for, is it just for, it's just for the tournaments that run through bullpen tournaments? Is that, am I to understand that correctly?
But they will be running all of the tournaments for Kokomo. That will be the only body that will be managing tournaments or games that take place at those fields, those 8 fields that are mentioned.
Okay, that's what leads to my question, because if you look, there's another outfit, PBR, and they have 3 tournaments scheduled at Championship Park in June and 1 scheduled at Grand Park. So is that a separate, is that a completely separate entity that would operate, and you know, they're not involved with bullpen, correct?
So let me speak to that very quickly, and I know Blake is on, and he correct me if I'm in error in any of my comments.
Okay.
All of Championship Park in Kokomo, the 8-field complex will be managed, if this approved, will be managed by bullpen tournaments.
Okay.
PBR is a part of bullpen tournaments. They themselves own that brand and will be producing those events. Essentially, what will happen is Championship Park will become an extension of what already takes place here at Grand Park. They will not be looking to produce new events. They will be adding teams to existing events that already take place at Grand Park. So when you look at this, essentially they are able to take on an additional, let's call it 50 to 100 teams, whereas before those teams would not otherwise be able to participate in their tournaments.
So the RDC would receive those rebates on PBR tournaments as well.
That is correct.
Bob, if I can, or
yeah.
William, if I can, the one thing I would add to that is we currently run PBR events at Grand Park. The only way we can get out of our hotel arrangement is by asking permission from the RDC or William. We have never asked permission.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, good question.
And we run you. Got it.
Okay. Any other comments, questions for William?
Yeah, this is Brian Ferguson. I have a few. The consent refers to a management agreement being, I don't know, which is the operating agreement? No, management agreement. Has that been executed by the city of Kokomo?
I would defer. I don't believe anything has been executed at this point. The reason for the urgent nature of this conversation is the season is starting to, well, the season is upon us, and there's a lot that has to be done for them to get to a point where they can execute an agreement with Kokomo. And that's why we wanted to push this to this meeting so that we could work to get it approved.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you have an oral agreement with them in place?
Again, I would have to defer to Blake. I am not germane to those conversations.
We've discussed at length. Our agreement is dependent on the city of Westfield and the RDC.
Did somebody on Westfield's behalf ask to see a copy of this draft management agreement?
Why would we have to see an agreement between Kokomo and Bullpen?
I think one of the provisions says that Recital J says that the commission determined that the proposed field agreement will not have a significant adverse effect on the Grand Park agreement. And I'm asking, how can that determination be made without seeing a copy of the field agreement or management agreement?
Well, all of the games would be scheduled by Bullpen in conjunction with the activities taking place. So they're running a tournament here at Grand Park, and correct me if I'm wrong, Blake, and then they're saying, okay, there's additional teams that have not been able to participate in the past that would like to participate, and those teams would then first initially, or as part of the process, be scheduled at the fields in Kokomo. And I would think ultimately maybe the championship games stuff would be, the semifinal games, those kinds of things will be scheduled here at Grant Park. Is that a fair description, Blake?
Correct. We currently use Zionsville High School, Westfield High School, Noblesville High School, Fishers, and Buff as additional offsites. We have exceeded our ability to touch local high schools. We actually went to the city and we did a cost analysis on adding fields at Grand Park, turning soccer fields into baseball fields a couple of years ago. We've explored every option and we've hit a wait list that we can no longer grow without additional fields. Our intent is to schedule every event through Bullpen tournaments and our portal at Grand Park.
Yeah, no, I understand why you guys want to do that. I guess what I'm asking is why wouldn't you provide us with a draft of the agreement? Is there something secret in there that you wouldn't want to share? Or, is it proprietary, confidential, what?
Honestly, I would have to defer and ask an owner. I don't think there's anything secret. I think we've been pretty open in our discussions with everyone.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but by secret, I mean, confidential, proprietary, that kind of stuff. Something that you would want to keep secret, not that you haven't been.
Yeah, I would have to, without the agreement fully be written, I don't know what would be in there and what wouldn't. It's only been in discussion. And so I don't think we have anything to hide necessarily.
All right, how about this? Can we agree that once you guys execute those agreements that the RDC will get copies of those?
I would defer to Ken on that, but yeah. I would have to read the final agreement before I could agree to that.
Mr. Ferguson, this is Todd. I may just suggest that your request is fair, that once those are executed with the city of Kokomo, those become publicly available and would be able to be shared at that point in time.
Okay. And
understood.
So I talked about whether the management agreement had been executed. Has the field agreement been executed or an agreement reached with the city of Kokomo?
We have no agreements in place with the city of Kokomo.
Okay, fair enough. Back to recital F.
And until we act to allow Bullpen to do that, they can't really go into any agreements because we haven't, in essence, waived that provision that they can't operate any other facilities.
No, I get that. I'm just trying to verify that an agreement hasn't already been reached. That's all.
Right. I understand. Okay. I missed your point. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I'm still sort of stuck on the determination without having seen the agreement. But at the last RDC meeting, there was a representation that the RDC would receive at a minimum 150,000 up to 200,000, and I believe that was per year, was it not?
Per year. That's correct, Brian.
Yeah. What's the basis for that determination, and what information is being used to make that representation?
So as you probably are aware, we work with a third-party housing company, Site Search, that books all of the rooms for the campus. We allow them to conduct an estimate. Blake worked very closely with them to conduct this estimate based off of the number of teams that would be added at Championship Park. And there you have their formula whereby there's X amount of teams, X amount of rooms, our percentage of rebate, and that's where that estimate was derived from.
So it was the third party firm that does this for a living that gave us that information, William. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Wouldn't we be able to compare that with the numbers that we're getting currently at Grand Park somehow, like per hotel or something? Are we getting the same rate, whether it's a hotel and?
Yeah. So the rates, the way that this works, just so you're aware, the properties that we're booking we already booked in Kokomo. We already booked properties in Indianapolis. And to this year, I think Blake shared with me that we've got teams as far away as Lafayette. So it'll be the same process that's used currently to book our events. It will just now encapsulate also those 8 diamonds where those teams will be playing at Championship Park.
Okay. I think the next question I have is, there's a reference to good and valuable consideration, the receipt and sufficiency of which are hereby acknowledged. What's the consideration that's being valued and receipt and sufficiency? Well, I guess I don't fully understand what that means.
Basically, we're giving them the right to do this type of agreement with Kokomo in trade for the additional fees that we would collect that would come back to the RDC or come back to Grand Park and the RDC. So that, I think maybe it's a question for Manny, but I think that's my interpretation of it. If I'm wrong, please correct me.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully ask Mr. Reese, as the drafter of these instruments, to further explain the spirit of that portion of the recitals.
Could you ask the question again so I'm clear exactly what you're asking? Thanks.
Yeah, it's the now therefore clause.
Okay.
On page 2. I guess I'm asking, what does that mean? When referenced, the foregoing and other good and valuable consideration, the receipt and sufficiency of which are hereby acknowledged, commission hereby agrees as follows.
So that basically is saying that the parties, based upon what's set forth below, which is the agreement, that the parties are agreeing to operate and that there is consideration. And the consideration being that the commission will waive the section of the Grand Park agreement, which from that entering into another field agreement. So the commission is consenting to that. They're consenting to the other affiliate entering into the management agreement with Bullpen Tournaments, and that this consent is only with respect to this specific field agreement with the City of Kokomo and the management agreement with the BVK and Bullpen Tournaments to manage the facility, and for no other facility that Bullpen may be involved in or BVK would be involved in. And then secondly, it says that all the revenue that's received by Bullpen in connection with the tournament or the commission relating to hotels that at the facility, so this means Kokomo, that will be paid to and it's retained by the commission. So that, as was explained, as the tournaments now in Grand Park can be enlarged, the additional hotel rooms that come from the additional participants that allows the commission to collect their royalty fees on that.
Okay. Is there a reason why this is a separate agreement and not part of the amendment to management agreement?
Yes. Brian, the amendment to the management agreement deals with a specific period of time in which there was an oral modification of the original management agreement. This goes specifically to one portion of the overall management agreement. So this is contemplated within the management agreement where there would be a separate consent document. So they are not linked in any way.
Oh, okay, so then is it fair to characterize it as a second amendment?
No, it's not amending, it's a consent that's required under the management agreement.
Okay, how would I know that consent has been given if it's not part of the agreement? I just have to know that there's a consent out there?
Well, this agreement, like all the other agreements, becomes a matter of public record. So this record would be in the same file, if you will, with the management agreement, the agreement between BT and the commission.
Okay, I don't know. Conceptually, to me, it would have been nice to have sort of all the agreements and the amendments to it and consents and everything all together. But I see where you're coming from.
Right.
I don't think I have any more questions relating to the consent agreement.
Okay, good. Thank you, Brian. Anyone else have any questions for Paul or Paul Reese or for William in regards to this agreement? Okay, hearing none, I'm open for a motion for approval.
Mr. President, this is Doug Holtz. I so move that we approve the agreement as presented.
Okay, do I have a second?
This is Jill. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Doug, a second by Jill Doyle. I'll take a roll call. All in favor of approving the agreement, please signify by saying aye. Doug Holtz?
Aye.
Jill Doyle?
Aye.
Brian Ferguson?
Well, I don't know if this is the time for comment or what. There was a reason why I wanted the other agreement first, and some of the answers that I was going to get would have been contingent on how I vote on this. And since I don't have those answers, I'm going to have to vote no.
Okay, fair enough. Bob Audrey?
No.
Okay, Joe Plankus, yes. Motion passes 3-2. COCO agreement is approved. Next item on the agenda, as we've switched them around, is the approval of the amendment agreement. William?
Yes.
Whoever's going to step forward here.
So Paul actually kind of introduced this already in the last segment, but I want to go back in time briefly to just share with the
Before you get started, William, before you get started, let me say one thing. And I've had a number of discussions with William to make sure I have clear understanding of what's involved here. I would ask that the commission members wait until William finishes the entire dissertation, if you would, from start to finish, because it comes out with a very clear understanding of what takes place at each step of the process. So if you want to ask some questions, you'll be free to ask them after William goes through it. But I think to keep a flow and get a clear understanding, when he and I spoke and he went through it from start to finish, much easier than having a number of interruptions along the way. So please take a note. If there's a specific item you want to come back to, we certainly will allow all the time necessary to do that. Okay, William, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll take you back to 2014 when we opened the campus. At that point in time, there were 2 service providers providing landscape management services for the campus. Brightview and Bullpen Tournaments, as it relates to the diamond side of the complex, what we call inside the fences. So per the original agreement, the 2014 agreement that's been referenced during our discussion, Bullpen Tournaments is responsible for maintaining inside those fences. At that time, we had Brightview here, and they conducted all of the other services for the entire campus. All the common area services for both field sport and the diamond side of the campus, as well as all of the field work on the field sport side of the campus. As we transition, kind of 2017 era, we started to recognize the fact that the level of service was continued to increase on the diamond side of the complex. And at that time, started having discussions with Ken and Blake about providing a better level of service for the diamond side of the complex as it relates to some of the janitorial practices as well as some of the landscape management practices. At that time, in the year 2017, we agreed to start having the discussion about realigning the scope of work as it relates to Brightview and removing them from the service, removing them as the service provider for the diamond side of the complex and allowing Bullpen to pick up those services as they were already working in that space within what I call inside the fences. To Paul's point earlier, that agreement was never memorialized or documented. Therefore, we fast forward to where we are today, looking to memorialize that agreement and then sunset it as of a date to be determined, whether that's today or in the agreement that I think you have. Our initial discussion started on December 15th of 2020 to sunset this agreement in order for us to get back to operating as we were outlined in the original 2014 agreement, where we receive our percentage of gate and our percentage of apparel. So this amendment agreement is solely to look at memorializing that time and period where we were operating under the oral agreement and then sunset that agreement such that we revert back to the original 2014 agreement. So before I take questions, I would ask that Paul chime in to make sure I didn't leave anything out.
No, I think, William, you described it correctly.
So I would be, I know there may be some questions. I would be happy to answer any questions as it relates to the amendment agreement.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, William. This is Bob Beaudry. Okay, so my first question is, in the amended agreement, is section 1011 that includes the no compete still in force?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know if the amendment just was highlighting the areas that were being changed and the rest of it was enforced, because on the amended agreement, section 1011 isn't on there. So I'm guessing that's just the amended part of the agreement.
Correct. The only parts of the management agreement that are being amended are set forth in the amendment. So section 1011 remains subject to the consent that's just been approved.
Okay. So having said that, here's my big issue with this whole deal. If you call it a memorialization, that's fine. But I mean, it's pretty specific in the original agreement from 2014 that any changes made to this agreement must be made in writing. And I don't consider an email in writing. That was not submitted through the official channels. It should have been presented to the RDC. And that in itself is problematic. But the bigger problem I have is, and I've been beating this dead horse, but we have received absolutely no financial reporting throughout the duration, at least since I've been on the RDC, and I've been hard pressed to find anything. And the section 4.01, as you know, states what the percentages are to be paid on the gate revenue. The whole section 4 seems to deal with the revenue, but section 3.5 deals with the reporting. And there's a requirement that the RDC receives monthly balance sheet and income statements and an annual report that's due no later than 90 days after the end of the fiscal year. So here's the thing. We're asked to make these decisions without any valuation on the services, without any valuation on what gate revenues have been received. Any numbers we're given are for practical purposes, could be something reached out in the air and grabbed, because we just don't know, and we've had no financial information to rely on to bring that to bear. And so it's a multiple question. Why have we not been getting the financial reports? Who's responsible for the fact that the RDC has not been receiving these reports? And how are we supposed to make this determination moving forward without the financial information? I mean, the city has a significant investment in this facility. You would think that we wouldn't run it like a popsicle stand, and we would get these financial reports so that we would actually know what was going on. I mean, you would avoid so many problems and so many questions if we had the information that we're supposed to have. We don't have that information. And I might sound like I'm getting on my high horse. I'm not, but I mean, as a taxpayer, it frustrates me. As an RDC member, I'm trying to figure out just what is going on and how this thing is operating without the RDC having this information. We can't make an informed decision. There is no way possible that I could vote to go back 3 years and backdate an agreement without that kind of information. And I don't think anybody sitting on this commission could. So therefore, I am requesting that this gets tabled until we have the adequate financial information made available to us, so we can at least make an informed decision. I mean, heck, I might end up being in favor if I actually saw the numbers, but I don't have anything to reference. I mean, I'd have to say right at the gate, I'd have to say no. I can't, there's no talking about it, because I'd have nothing to base my decision on.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead, Todd.
Mr. Bodger, you make all valid points, of which I will not contest. If you so desire to make a motion to table, but before you eventually may choose to make that motion, I would offer that William can speak to some of these numbers. You're exactly correct. The language in the contract is very explicit, and that financial reporting should occur as laid out in the contract. But if you want to give William an opportunity to speak to what revenues over this 3-year period, net revenues, would have been collected, or actually bullpen, since they're on the call, to help fill in those gaps, we'll do that. But if not, if that's insufficient, then I'll digress, yield the microphone, and you can present your motion to table.
Well, the only thing I can say is I would like, maybe William can answer, whose responsibility is it to make sure that these financial reports are being received and that the RDC is given copies of them to make proper decisions and evaluations?
Mr. Bodry, I'll take that question if you don't mind. I will take that responsibility, and moving forward, and Mr. Coker is quite aware, and we are working, as I stated in my earlier email reply to you, we're working to remedy that so it works in a very efficient manner, so it's less human dependent.
Hey, Joe, I think at this point, I would like to make a motion to table this until we have adequate financial information in order to make an informed decision.
Okay, so stated. Do we have a second to that motion?
Yeah, I'll second. Brian, I'll second.
Okay, Brian, second on that motion. Discussion. Todd's comment of allowing William to make give us some facts and figures, I think is valid. The more understanding we have, even if it's now before we take the vote on the motion, I would like to hear what William has to say. I think it'd be beneficial for all of us, and let him run through the figures that he does have. And certainly we need to get stuff in writing and so on, and we can discuss that later. But William, if you're okay with that, let's have you get into a little bit of detail.
Yes, that is not a problem if this is the appropriate time to do so. So I think the question is.
Well, I'm not sure that it is. Is the motion withdrawn?
No, after you make a motion in a second, Brian, then we have discussion. That's what this is all about. having
Okay.
discussion.
All right, so we got discussion before and after the motion. All right, fair enough.
Ed, William.
Yes, so I think what the question is that there needs to be a little more clarity related to the period in time in which we are operating under the oil agreement. Is that accurate from a revenue and an expense standpoint?
That's my understanding of the question.
Well, I have one. I would want it for all the years, going all the way back to 2014.
So, and we can share some of that information. Unfortunately, I'll just have to verbally give you those numbers, and just rest assured that any number that I provide to you today can be captured directly from the clerk treasurer's office. We used our official record system to pull these numbers, and I've spent the bulk of the day kind of calculating and making sure we're prepared to speak to these items.
Yep.
So,
But William,
is it fair to say that Bob and I asked for this stuff a while back when these three agreements were presented to us on Friday? They were presented on Friday. I think subsequently to Friday, Bob and I asked to see these numbers. Now we're getting them orally.
And we'll get them in writing too. But let him speak, if you would, Brian, and then we'll get back to the motion on the table.
yeah, so going back as far as 2015, on the revenue side, where we collected revenue from Bullpen for ticket revenue and apparel revenue, in 2015, we collected $41,283.31 for the year. 2016, we collected $97,144.80. 2017, we collected $130,000, 63 cents and 63 cents. So those were the years in which we collected the revenue from Bullpen tournaments for ticket revenue and apparel. So fast forward to 2018, that's when the oral agreement was essentially in effect, and through 2020. So if we're able to achieve what we're looking to accomplish here, our oral agreement would effectively end December of 2020. Over that 3-year span, we would have collected $703,000 of revenue from Bullpen. Now, on the flip side of that, we also have to take into account the expenses. So over that period of time, the reason that Bullpen was able to collect that revenue and keep it was because they also incurred the expenses for all of the common area maintenance as well as the janitorial expenses. These were expenses from 2015 through 2017 that the RDC paid for those services. So over that same 3-year period, if we kept the number of where we were paying, the RDC was paying for these services, and at that time we were paying Brightview for these services. Over that same period of time, we would have paid out $957,000 for the landscape services and the janitorial services. And I might add that is a static number, because that was the year-end number from 2017. So that number would have to remain in place for the 3-year period in order for that to be accurate. What transpired over that 3 years is Bullpen tournaments grew their events significantly and required additional janitorial services on that side of the park. So it is hard for me to imagine that we would have been able to keep up with that level of service at that same dollar amount. So net total to us, we're in the positive about $253,000 over that 3-year period that we're operating under the oral agreement.
Okay, so what you're saying, William, is because of the oral agreement, we gave up $703,000 in revenue, but we saved $957,000 in landscaping expenses.
That is correct.
So we end up with a net gain for Grand Park of 200, round numbers, $253,000.
Correct.
So even though, let's say we got sloppy with paperwork and all the rest of that, the net financial effect is a $253,000 positive, as I see it.
That is correct.
Okay.
How much the city was maintaining the field side of common areas, correct?
No, not at that time. So we, in 2018 is when we started to transition into managing in-house the fields. And then in 2019 is where we started to transition to cover some of the common area maintenance.
The field common area or the baseball common area?
So at no point in time has the RDC ever maintained from an in-house service the Diamond area commons.
Okay, fair. All right, that's.
And this is where I think we run into an issue, because we're getting fed all these numbers when we're put up against the wall to make these decisions, and it's something that we should have had from the beginning, and we could have, you know, I honestly don't know what to think at this point, because I don't really know how these numbers were derived, where they came from, you know, any of that stuff.
Bob?
Yeah.
And that's based on receipts and expenses from invoices.
Joe, you've been on the RDC long enough. I mean, haven't you ever asked about where the financial statements were, or I mean, we're making a lot of financial decisions, and we're just taking people's word for it without actually seeing the numbers. Is that how we're expected to operate?
Well, certainly you've asked some good questions. We need to get numbers. We've gotten some numbers, and you know, we can work at postponing this and tabling this until we get written documentation, if in light of your motion.
I think that's reasonable. I think it's reasonable.
I don't think it's unreasonable, Bob. I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay, all right.
I don't disagree with that at all.
Okay.
You know, I operate with the philosophy that I've worked with these people for 20 years and I trust them.
Right.
Unlike some people in city government, I trust these people because I know what they're made of, and they're working for the citizens of Westfield 100% of the time and trying to make the best operation and amenities, and trying to operate it in a very professional and honest manner. So,
you know, I'm certainly not calling that into question. All I'm saying is, when I'm asked to make a decision based on financial numbers and dollars and things that financially impact the taxpayers and everything, I need to have that information provided to me as set forth, so that I can make the most informed and intelligent decision that represents the interests. I agree with you on a lot of that stuff.
That's a fair request.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have anything else that William or Todd or anyone wants to add? And then we'll go back to Bob's motion to table it until next meeting with additional information to be provided.
Yeah, let's keep talking about it, I guess. So on that report that we're going to get, I want to see all the revenue categories separately for each year.
Okay, when you say separately, what do you mean, Brian, when you say?
Well, how much do we get for 4.01 admission revenue? How much did we get for 4.02 food and beverage revenue? How much do we get for 4.03 merchandise revenue? How much do we get for 4.04 hotel revenue? How much do we get for 4.06 parking revenue?
Well, okay, those numbers will be made available, but the landscaping versus the revenue for the apparel and tickets,
yeah,
are really what's in question here. That's where the decision is coming in. Those other numbers are good numbers, and certainly those numbers will be shared. William scheduled a report to us in April with a first quarter report and a final year-end report. So we'll certainly see all those numbers in total, but I think it needs to be separated, Brian, to stick with what is involved with this amendment agreement. And then there's an overall picture that's, you might say, I'll call it a bigger picture, if I can use that term.
Mr. Chairman, this is Todd. I think all the data requests that have been made, not only in writing or in email exchanges, is quite a plethora of that, but what has been articulated in this discussion of the motion William has all that information, as does what is the system of record with the clerk's office. We will work with Bullpen to produce those their numbers as well in a deliverable fashion.
Okay, so unless there's any other questions, let's get back to Bob's motion.
Well, yeah, I still have some. I mean, I'll let you know, I guess, when I'm done. It might be easier than trying to wrap it up. I mean, since we're going to talk about the agreement, let's finish it up, right? So I'm still trying to figure out how we got to this point. I mean, Bob makes a good point that paragraph 10.08 of the management agreement is pretty clear when it says no provision of this agreement may be amended or otherwise modified, except by an agreement in writing by the parties. I guess I'm trying to figure out why one or both parties decided to deviate that and who knew about it and when.
Well, now we're getting in, I think we're getting into the weeds here a little bit, Brian. We have the motion that's on the table.
That wasn't directed to you, Joe, that question.
Well, here's how I'm going to answer it. We've got a motion on the table.
Wait. Now you want to move to the motion? Hold on. We said we were going to talk about this stuff. We're talking.
But you're getting into other items that are beyond the categories that refer to this particular agreement, Brian.
How so?
We're dealing with what the agreement was verbally and trying to memorialize it, and William's giving you the financial figures that deals with all that period of time where we had a verbal contract and it was positive for the city. And now we're saying, hey, we need to memorialize that for permanent record for the city so that people know what happened between 2014 and 2020.
Well, we didn't have an oral agreement with them, despite what your characterization there, and that's exactly what we're talking about. I'm asking how we got to that point, that there was a verbal agreement. Now you're saying, well, we don't need to talk about that.
Todd, you want to discuss that?
Yeah, so Mr. Ferguson, if you would just ask the question again. I get lost in the back and forth.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to figure out how we got to this point where we're being asked to ratify a handshake agreement when the paragraph 10.08 of the management agreement is very clear in my view. It's not ambiguous. It says no provision of this agreement may be amended or otherwise modified except by an agreement in writing by the parties.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm asking is, at what point, what parties were involved, at what point, and then why did they think they had authorization to enter into a handshake, quote unquote, agreement that's specifically barred by the written agreement?
Well, I'm quite aware of what that section of the agreement reads. What parties were involved? Let me take your questions as I can remember them. Certainly Bullpen Tournament, Mr. Knox, myself, Mayor Cook. At the time, the city and the Redevelopment Commission's lawyer. There is a resolution approved by the Redevelopment Commission that conveys and delegates authority to not only myself, but to Mr. Knox. And so with that, to give you the history, building on what Mr. Knox has already articulated about the quality of service and the cost thereof, we began to explore this particular expansion of services that Bullpen and their affiliate provide outside the fences. That's the long and short of it. Nothing more, nothing less.
You said you were quite familiar with that paragraph, and the resolution you're referring to, I don't think I've seen, but is that the one where it names you the executive director of the RDC?
Correct.
So I'm trying to figure out then, with knowledge of that paragraph and the fact that you're the executive director of the RDC, why that would go about. And then I'm not sure what was the reasoning why this now needs to be sunsetted. How come it wasn't sunsetted 2 years ago or 1 year ago, or why did it take so long?
Well, clearly the scrutiny that has been brought about, and rightfully so, by members of this current city council. I've had this conversation with the chair of the finance committee. We're memorializing what both parties entered into verbally, executed upon, and quite frankly, would hold up under a legal analysis under promissory estoppel. So with that full knowledge, we were moving forward to see if this economic rearrangement would work. It's just that simple.
Would somebody like to explain promissory estoppel to me?
Paul or Manny?
Yeah, this is Manny. Promissory estoppel is a ends up being a legal claim where one party promises something to another party, the other party relies on that promise and takes action to its detriment, and therefore could be obligated to that other party if there's a breach. It is essentially a contractual obligation when there is no written agreement. And so we're delving into an uncomfortable position given the other parties on the phone. So I'd recommend that this type of conversation be cut short, because we're essentially getting on the brink of providing legal advice. If there is a dispute, it'd be a dispute with the bullpen tournaments if they could potentially collect revenues they were owed from the city if this doesn't move forward.
Okay, I'm not sure that I agree with that assessment, especially considering that you can't have a separate oral agreement. So I don't know how you can be stopped from.
Mr. Ferguson, your agreement notwithstanding, that's my legal advice.
Okay, fair enough. Pardon me, I've lost my train of thought. So I guess continuing on with the management agreement. Okay, so I know what I was going to ask. So you mentioned breach. Has bullpen tournaments? Well, first of all, how many agreements does the city have with bullpen tournaments?
As far as for management services, just the 2014 agreement.
For anything?
Well, there are several. Oftentimes, we rent diamonds for our soccer events, so there are agreements for those activities. I'm not sure what other agreements there are, but essentially the lease agreement for their space that they occupy, as well as the management agreement, are the two essential agreements.
I don't know much about this, but is there an agreement? Didn't the fields change from grass to turf? Is that an agreement that's with the Bulls?
There was a conversion of the infields from grass or dirt to turf, and there was an agreement giving them right of entry to perform that work on our ground. Yes.
Okay, so that's the university agreements. So the next question is, has bullpen breached any one of these agreements, and when?
I'm not aware of any breach of any of the agreements that we have in place with bullpen tournaments.
Mr. Ferguson, I'm going to have to defer to the legal counsel on the call, because if someone is declaring, you're wanting someone to declare yes or no if there's been a breach, I think we're outside the bounds, sir.
Yeah, my mute button was on. We're not going to be answering that question.
Well, okay, fair enough. Here's why I ask it.
Whether or not there's a privilege, let me finish, Mr. Ferguson.
Okay.
Whether or not there's a privilege is something that discussions of which the city holds the privilege, and an individual member of a commission of the city cannot waive that privilege, nor will I allow it to be answered by an employee of the city in this context. If there are discussions to be had potentially about whether there's breach or whether anything should be pursued against any vendor of the city, I'm open to have those discussions with any member of the commission.
Brian, let me make a suggestion.
Wait, it was my turn next. So the reason I asked that question is, to me, from a business standpoint, I would not prefer to enter into another agreement with a party who's already been breaching the current agreements that we have.
You're out of line, Brian.
Wait a minute. Hold on. I wasn't done. You interrupted me. I didn't say there was a breach. I asked the question and nobody wants to answer it.
And you're not going to get an answer.
Fair enough. I'm trying to explain why I asked that question.
Okay, make it quick.
I just did, but you interrupted. it's fair enough, I think, to find out whether there's actually been a breach on the agreements that we currently have before you enter into new ones. That's unreasonable, you guys think, in your opinion? That's completely out of line, huh?
Breach discussion. We've just been advised by attorneys to leave that alone. Okay, let me make a suggestion, Brian. Since you're new to the RDC and we haven't really had a chance to sit down with you at all to kind of give you updates. We've had some training from Cam at the last meeting, but I think there's obviously a lot more to it that I think would be great if we can meet with you and Todd and John Rogers and myself and go through. We've done this with the other commission members as they come on board to go through all of the things that we do, what in more detail than what was perhaps given with the discussion that Cameron had with us last month, or our last meeting. So if you'd like to do that, we can set that up, and I think it'll be enlightening for everyone to get that understanding, because you've stated yourself in one of your emails that you're relatively new and there's a lot of things you don't know, and hopefully we can fill in some of those gaps. So if you're okay with that, I'll ask Todd to schedule some time for that.
I have several other issues, but it sounds like we're wrapping up and wanting to move more towards the motion. But before we do, there was one other paragraph, at least, that I wanted to talk about, and that's number 7. It says, neither this agreement nor any memorandum hereof may be recorded in the office of the recorder of Hamilton County, Indiana. And what's the purpose of that paragraph?
That's the question for Mr. Reese.
Sorry, I had to unmute. The reason for that is that this agreement does not go to the title to the real estate, which is held by the Redevelopment Authority. So therefore, this is just merely an agreement between the parties. It is a public document, so it is of availability to the public. So there's no need for this to be recorded in the office of the recorder.
I see what you're, okay. So what you're saying is the office of the recorder deals with physical real estate. Okay. But that would still be a public document. Fair enough. Okay.
Right.
I interpreted that to mean somehow that it would not be a public document.
No.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else, Brian?
Well, I don't know. I guess we'll see whether we actually table this or not. And then, because if we don't, then I'll have some other stuff. But if we do, then I can defer it.
Okay. Any other comments before we take a vote? Okay. We have a motion on the floor by Bob, seconded by Brian, to table this agreement to the next meeting. I'll take a poll. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Brian Ferguson.
Aye.
Bob Beaudry.
Aye.
Doug Holtz.
Aye.
Jill Doyle. Jill Doyle.
Did we lose her?
No, sorry, I forgot to unmute.
Unmute.
Yes, I agree to table till the next meeting.
Joe Plankus, aye. We will table it to the next meeting. Okay, let's go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the field maintenance agreement. William, you want to start in on this one, sir?
Mr. Chairman, this is Todd, if I may. Mr. Chairman, this is Todd, if I may.
Go ahead, Todd.
Okay, I think it makes sense, while I'm not a commission member, in light of the motion that just passed, it makes sense perhaps to entertain a motion of like kind for this second instrument. While they are separate instruments, they are obviously very much related. It sounds to me like there is some consistency in information that Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Beaudry are seeking, and it seems logical. And you can gavel me down if you think otherwise, that perhaps that the chair should entertain a motion from one of your members to do the same with this particular instrument as well.
I think those are appropriate comments. Todd, I'll make the motion to table the next agreement until the next meeting, and we have opportunity to receive more information. So that's my motion. Do I have a second?
This is Bob Beaudry. I'll second.
Okay, Bob Beaudry, second. We'll take a poll. Well, first, any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Joe Plankus, yes. Todd or Doug Holtz,
Yes.
Jill Doyle,
Yes.
Bob Beaudry,
Yes.
Brian Ferguson.
Yes.
Okay, motion agreement is tabled until the next RDC meeting in April. Do we have any other business before the commission, Mr. Rogers or Todd?
No, sir. None that I have.
Okay.
I do not have any either.
Okay.
I'd like to put something down. We received this report at the last meeting, and so is there going to be time scheduled on an agenda where we discuss this?
Sure, we can put it on the next month's agenda, Brian, no problem.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, good. Any other things for the good of the order? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the meeting adjourned at 6:06. Thank you, folks, for participating. Appreciate it. Short.
Yep.
Have a good evening.
Good
Thank
evening.
you.
Hold on.